Paul Yokovitis. I'm an estate planning lawyer with Carey Estate Planning.
Kyle Smalling, also with Capital City Law, speaking about issues related to business law.
And I'm Elizabeth Stevenson with New Direction Family Law. And I'm so happy that all of y'all are here. Our motto is that education is power. So we love doing things like this. So feel free, even if it's not a question that you have. Everybody probably has come in touch with someone who's going through a separation and divorce that you may have a question about. And so we are more than happy to answer that for you tonight.
I'm Sarah Hink. I'm another partner over at New Direction Family Law. And I'm happy to have us all here. I actually graduated from Campbell Law with two of our board people up here. And then Paul, you were the year before us.
Yeah,
so
sorry, Central Town.
But Kyle, Amanda, and I all went to Campbell for the 2014 year. So it's really nice to have us all together speaking today with y'all.
Awesome. Well, I'll actually open it up. Does anybody have any questions to begin with that they want to start? No pressure. If not, like I said, I've got some waiting in the wings here. But if anybody had one that they were interested in starting off with, absolutely, take it away.
I have a real estate question. Do you, because mostly I'm in real estate, so we do transactions, closing transactions, but do you do things like land, like encroachment or people, problems between neighbors and
Yeah.
that kind of thing?
Yeah, absolutely. It comes up a lot of times in the closing process. So when a buyer gets a survey done before they decide to buy a house and they realize there's an encroachment, that can be a potential issue, and that's something we like to deal with before closing. We also have had clients come to us who have a dispute or an encroachment or something of that nature after they've already moved on to the property or own the property. So yes, that is something we deal with. And do you have anything specific about a specific encroachment? It sounds like you have something in mind.
I do, because we are renovating a house that is the HOA or, property that expired in 1965, 8 or something like that. And so it's a lake, and then there's like some gray area as to who owns what. And so I think it would take a little bit of research on, looking back through the property.
Yeah, what we would do is we would do a title search on that property, go back and see who owns what, and then maybe help you with some negotiation to try to come up with an agreement that we could put in place.
Okay.
And that's why you go to someone like Amanda to do that, because whenever I prepare a deed, it says without the benefit of a title search. Yeah. It's either very simple, quick deeds, anything that you really want to have well done. I mean, we do it well, but it's just not, we don't do.
Not intense.
Yeah. And that's a great, thank you for that question, because that's something I meant to mention as well. I don't want you to think that your question has to be addressed to everyone on the panel. Like hers was pretty much just real estate law, and that is perfectly okay. So if you have one for just one of the areas, that is awesome too. That's what we're here for.
Yeah.
So. Does it involve an HOA, or is it just your property and like a neighboring property?
HOA is long defunct.
Okay. I was
Unless
hoping maybe
somebody's
somebody else could cover the cost for you on that if there was an HOA, but we can talk about it later. And there is, on the very back table, there are cards and brochures if you haven't had a chance to swing by there, just so you can make sure you have the contact information, as well as this video will stay on New Direction's Facebook page and our YouTube page, so you can definitely find it, or just reach out to me or anyone here, and we'll be sure to address the question if it comes out after the fact. So if nobody has any other questions right now, then I will get started with some of these bright orange cards I have up here. The first one, Paul, you're up.
All right. Yeah,
And potentially Elizabeth or Sarah as well. Cool. Can I leave nothing to my spouse in my will? And if so, can that be contested?
Yeah, so that's two parts. So yes, you can leave nothing to your spouse, right? In North Carolina, we have a provision that sort of prevents the disinheritance of spouses, though. It's called the elective share. And the spouse has 6 months to make that election post death of their spouse, right? So if they don't make that election, then your will that disinherited them can be enforced, or if they've waived that right in a premarital or postmarital agreement. So kind of a long answer, but.
But I do want to say, if you're separated, you're still married. So I always tell my clients, when they're sitting with me, if you drop dead today, the person that you're trying to get divorced from is going to inherit everything you have if you do not have a will. So you need to, and we do, as Sarah said, we do simple wills, but if you need something more in depth in that, you guys can certainly do that, but it's something to think about, because just because you're separated, they still have the state rights. And
Yeah, and the elective share is net worth. It's not just probate assets, so it's life insurance, 401k, it's anything that is owned by the deceased spouse. So it's 50%.
Very important in prenups too, like
Right.
you mentioned, and prenups have a bad rep, and really, we don't get a lot of cases in prenups, but I think they're great, and they don't mean that you're gonna get divorced,
Doesn't mean I
that,
love you.
yeah,
Yeah.
no one thinks when they get married that they're gonna get divorced, it's not like that, but it's kinda like insurance, I mean, no one wants to die or get in a car accident, but,
If you did, there's
I mean,
something.
you're gonna die one day, but that's a little different, but at the same time, it's something to include in a prenup, and other things too, just to protect you, and that's already in there. And it doesn't mean that you can't still will something to them if you don't get divorced,
Right.
you still can, but they still waive that elective share should you decide not to include them in your will, but.
Yeah.
Separation agreements can do the
Yeah.
same thing, even if you haven't gotten divorced, but you have a separation agreement, you can waive all of those state rights and elective shares and that kind of thing.
And we'll see that a lot with second marriages when you have a mixed family. I press prenups like crazy because they can be narrowly tailored. You don't have to waive alimony, you don't have to waive
Right.
ED, those sort of things. You can just waive inheritance rights if that's what your plan needs to be, right? If you want to protect your minor or adult children from, the stepmom or stepdad, right? Then you can have basic carve-outs that, or you can just sort of plan around it, where 50% goes to the kids and 50% goes to the spouse. And then you basically figure it out.
Mhm.
So Jen has mentioned post-nups recently. Is that becoming more common, or?
Not as much as it probably should be, just like prenups. I mean, it's basically a prenup that you do during your marriage, and it's like a contract, like any other contract, and you can contract anything that's not legal or
Against public
policy, so, it's never too late to come to an agreement and, just decide, like, look, we have a lot of assets all of a sudden, or maybe we should start thinking about the future, and these are things that we should go ahead and cover, when our children are a certain age and you're in a new place in your life, it's never a bad idea.
Right. And I just came out of 2 days of mediation, we signed an agreement, and, the wife, who was not my client, did not apparently get the deal she wanted, so now she wants to reconcile. So my fear is.
Funny how that works.
3 months down the road, we're gonna be starting from scratch, so I've talked to my client, and we're trying to put together a post-nup that says, this is what we agreed, nothing about alimony or any of that, but just the property, because, that's a little scary, it's like, oh, I work for this, you're staying at home mom, and so if we start from scratch again, so there are all sorts of reasons to sort of do that and protect yourself, I think.
And you mentioned, just on the side note, post-nups or prenups, you meant something that's against public policy. So what's an example of something that might be against public policy that could not go into a prenup or a post-nup?
Well, you couldn't put child custody provisions in there, because that's sort of left up at the end of the day to a judge, who is, they get to decide what's in your children's best interest, unfortunately.
Right, you can't contract to like some kind of involuntary slavery
Yeah.
or
Yeah,
servitude
exactly.
where you're required to do a certain act every day or something like that.
Yeah.
Okay, I just always found that
Well,
part
I was gonna say
interesting.
that.
It's for all those
Say that.
major athletes that try to put all these weight requirements for their spouses and their agreements. Okay,
Walk that line very.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so now looks like this one's involving real estate and family law. So, I am married now, but we'll be separating. There's nothing formal in place yet, but I want to buy a house. Can I do that? So the answer is you can do that, but you need to have certain things in place in order to ensure that your spouse, who you're separating from, isn't also a part of that purchase. So in North Carolina, your spouse has rights to whatever kind of property you have or you purchase during the marriage. So if you are separated and you're gonna buy a house, your spouse needs to waive their rights to that future purchase. Or they're gonna be on the deed with you, or they're gonna need to sell the property with you. So if you're buying with a loan, absolutely, you're gonna need something in place. If you're buying with cash, not necessarily, but you really should, because your spouse can make claim to that property later on. Do you have anything to add?
I was gonna say for us, usually that's done with a free trader, and so it can, in a separation agreement, also be addressed, but typically for us, we're looking for a document we can record, put on the record right before that spouse that is separated is taking ownership. Cause it makes it really clear for anybody down the line that this person is clearly waiving It's an agreement.
It is.
Basically, it's an agreement between the two spouses who are separated or are going to separate. It says, hey, I can spend my money on a piece of property, and that piece of property is mine, and you have no
You have
marital
no rights.
rights.
Right, it's pretty much like for purchasing this, I'm purchasing this property as if I'm not married at all. And the person I might still be married to waives their claim to it, so.
A lot of times there's a free trader clause within a separation
Separation agreement.
agreement, but ideally, your attorney has also drafted a separate free trader agreement, because as Kyle said, we're gonna have to record this. It's gonna be on public record, and you don't want your entire
Right,
separation agreement being recorded. I've had people say, I don't care, go ahead, but I think for the most part, most people don't want everything that's in their separation agreement there for public record.
Yeah, it's better practice for sure.
Yeah.
Cause what all goes into the separation agreement, like, that you wouldn't want necessarily on
I
record?
mean, it's like we do a lot of them where if you have some issues that they might have to do for custody purposes, do a breathalyzer every time they pick up their kids, you know, and I just had that happen. And we want we want the custody provisions in an order, but we want that in a separation agreement that's not recorded, kind of thing.
List of assets,
Sets
bank
and that sort of
accounts,
thing, yeah.
definitely want that out there.
Cause anybody can walk in the courthouse and look up your stuff, you know.
Yeah. And I don't wanna assume that everyone knows as far as the stipulation for North Carolina law of being separated. So can you talk about how long people have to be separated in North Carolina before they can get a divorce?
A year.
A year and a
A year
day.
and a day.
A year and a day.
File the day after.
So is there any talk of that being changed anywhere?
There, you know, we were at the family law conference back in April, and so it's the annual big one in North Carolina with the family law attorneys, and, you know, it's hard, cause I have a group of attorneys from the family law section that try to communicate with the attorneys and people that work on the general statutes, which are our elected officials, and, you know, all of them really, it's hard to get in touch with them, and hard to listen, and, you know, what do we actually wanna impart on them, what part do we really wanna make a difference in, and it's typically not that part, so, it's hard to change laws.
Wait till they wanna get divorced really quickly.
Yeah,
Right.
then it'll happen.
Is there any way to get that waived in any way? Like, is there something
No.
somebody can do? and-
Yeah, you can go to Florida or Nevada or and take up residency, but neither party can waive that time period.
I have a question. What if the parties stipulate that they've been separated for a year?
Then you're committing perjury.
I want no part of that.
I want no part of it.
Yeah. Kenny, I know you had a question?
So what does separated technically mean? You have to have a separation document if,
No, in North Carolina, the separation agreement is just a contract between two people that says who's gonna do what. If you have taken up, you can't sleep in two separate bedrooms under one roof.
correct, but
There
if
is some-
you live in a different
You have to
state
have a different,
for a year,
you have to have separate residences for a year and a day. There has been some case law that says if you have like a garage apartment that has a separate entrance, that has a separate door, that can count as a separate residence or domicile. You can have, you know, incidences of having intimacy and that sort of thing, it doesn't toll the year, but just don't
Yeah.
move in, don't get your mail, don't take
And
meals
also,
together.
don't hold yourself out to be married still. People, they do it for their family members, pretend like they're still married, and then all of a sudden, one spouse thinks that they don't, they wanna change the date of separation. They said, well, look, we went to all these events together, our family didn't know. It happens more than we think. It's just like, oh my gosh.
You're
So,
on
yeah.
day 360.
Yeah.
So it's not a bright line test.
No,
It really
it's
isn't,
not.
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
so back to buying a house while they're separated, right? So easy, $1 million, is that, and they're splitting it 50-50, 500 to each, and she takes 250, that reduces her, she only has 250 left, is that correct?
In your simple equation.
Yeah.
It's never really quite that simple.
I understand, but I don't know how else to explain it, but
Yeah.
that reduces her part of the separation
Correct,
agreement.
yeah,
or
with
the-
the property division.
She
yeah.
knows that,
Yeah.
right, she still doesn't think she's
Right.
getting 50%.
Right, and there are cases also where you have to be separated for longer to get divorced. It's like mental incapacity. I think is that the only one?
I don't
Or
know.
severe illness, I think it's like 3 years or 2 years.
Yeah.
Wow.
That was kind of, my question is, what if the person refuses to sign the separation agreement, your spouse, or you want to sell your house and move on, move to Des Moines or wherever you want to live,
Mm-hmm.
and they refuse to sign, is there, does the judge then get involved and kind of?
Then you have to file a lawsuit and get it done, cause it's like buying a car, you both have to agree on the terms, and if one won't agree, and your only other option is to file a lawsuit and start litigation. Doesn't mean you can't settle, but it just means nobody then has any choice to do anything.
But
The judge
then the judge will decide
That's right,
and make him or her
exactly.
release their claim. Okay. So that's like about a year, 2 years, how long?
Yeah, well, you can always get divorced on the,
Well, not talking like,
yeah, the actual other parts.
Yeah, if you're getting just divorced, the other party can't stop you from getting divorced. If you've been separated a year and a day, even if they don't want it.
But the other
Right.
parts can take a
But
couple
the
of
property,
years.
the custody,
Yeah,
and the
that-
support is
that could be another
completely
year.
separate from that, right?
Yeah.
I have a question along those similar lines. So I'm a business broker, I sell other people's businesses, and when a couple owns a business, how is that business valued in a fair and equitable way?
That's
That's
tough.
your business evaluation.
So-
Kyle?
Oh my goodness, you had
That was actually my next question.
So the simple and short answer is you do generally need to get evaluation. So you gotta talk to somebody who does evaluations and get one, and that can be very expensive. There are different ways to approach that. Some might be a little less expensive, but basically more accuracy is gonna cost more money. In that context, you obviously have two individuals, both, I'm assuming, have an interest in this company. And so there probably is a great deal of negotiation around how much we wanna spend and know what it's worth, so that we can then ultimately just divide it into pieces. But yeah, for professional, individuals that are professional evaluators of companies, CPAs will do some of that work and some estimation for you. Sometimes you can wrangle brokers into giving some ballpark figures too. But ultimately, in a context like this, where there is adversarial parties, it's probably gonna revolve around some attorneys coming to the table and not picking somebody that one side thinks is particularly unfair or an unfair way to gauge the situation.
They don't have to own, but remember, in the business, even if you don't work in the business, even if you've never been a part of it, it's still a marital asset. So you may be a partner in the business, but the spouse over here still has half of whatever your half is, she gets half of your half, so she wants it evaluated too in that way, even if she's not an owner or a partner or anything with her.
And it depends on what kind of business it is, what kind of evaluation you get, I think too, right? Like, service industry is gonna be different from a business that creates goods
Mhm.
or owns property that's gonna actually have an actual value to it.
That's what I think, right?
Yeah, so it's tough, and you know, when you get to negotiations, and one person wants to keep it, if there's the owner and operator, and the other person just wants money out of it, it's really tough to really
It is.
deal with that. So, and dividing a business too,
Right.
and I know that just in one of my cases, you know, they have a business, and they want to divide it even before the divorce, just because one person couldn't really be a part of it anymore, so how do you even do that?
And I think there's another card in there, but it talks.
Guys are
about,
making this
you know,
really easy for me.
But ultimately, then you run into issues with how you're gonna finance something like that. So if
Right.
there is this decision that the business is gonna survive, you know, especially something in the service industry, you can't just sell that to somebody else. If it's a law firm, you know,
Right.
your brand is kind of your interactions with your clients, and lots of other businesses
Right.
are that way. And so if it is going to have to at least remain with only one person at the end of the day, then you have difficult conversations about how you structure a buyout. And most lenders are very hesitant to finance that kind of stuff, especially when they know two parties are kind of currently at war over what happens to it.
So on that same, so if you're a business owner of the service industry and you're getting ready to get married to, and I'm not, but you're getting married to somebody who is also a business owner with the prenup, how complicated is it to make sure that both of those stay separate entities?
It's not complicated. Yours is yours, what's his is it?
You just get it right and written up ahead of time.
And you can also put things in there for the future, you know, if you acquire another business in the future, if it's yours, it's yours.
Right, and you can define what you might wanna be, like I'm doing one now where the only marital property is the residence that they live in. You know, and everything else is separate, so you can craft it, there's no boilerplate, it's crafted around what, you come to us and tell us what you want, and then we can craft that for you.
So like, I'm just an independent contractor, is that considered a business?
When you're sole proprietor, or you're
Well,
still in there
you
of
can
some
also
sort.
even put like whatever income you generate is your
Your
income,
income.
and then if you wanna decide to have one joint account where you get to choose how much you put in that joint account, and that joint account is gonna be your marital account, and that gets divided 50-50, but whatever else you decide to do with your money is your separate
one,
to.
right? It's a great idea.
Yeah.
No, I never thought about that,
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
cause like I don't have a brick and mortar, you know, it's just.
Yeah.
So while we're on the topic of prenups, Paul, how do prenups and estate work interact? Should attorneys put their heads together for that if somebody comes to a prenup and they wanna look at the estate part as well? How does that work?
Yeah, a lot of times they coincide. Sometimes I'm coming in on the back end. They've done the prenup well ahead of in time before they've come to see me. Maybe they've done it before they got married, and then when they started having kids, then they're starting to think about estate planning, guardianship, and those sort of things. Sometimes they're coinciding with each other, where we're working directly with family law attorneys to make sure the provisions are consistent. What you don't want is contradictory terms, right? But usually what you're doing is setting out legal rights. So we're talking about sort of like, going against the grain as far as what the statutory or the case law says in North Carolina for the prenup, and then we're saying basically intestacy or what your will or your trust says when it comes to the estate planning. But it relates to property rights, it relates to income rights and those sort of things. But ideally they coincide and they're married to each other.
Way to bring that full circle. Yes, ma'am, Becca.
Let's say you're separated and the spouse starts a business. Is there any ownership in that? With money that hasn't been distributed or equity distribution hasn't happened yet? What does that look like?
I think it would be like, when you separate, your marital estate stops. So any income, say you get a bonus that you earned, not from efforts during the marriage, but you just got it after separation, that's your separate property. But if the spouse started that business with funds that were in let's say a joint account that was earned during the marriage, I don't know that you would necessarily have any ownership in the business. I would say you have a right to have whatever value or whatever they took to buy that business, half of that is yours.
Seemed like if you use money from the joint account to purchase a house after the date of separation, you can trace that this down payment, $20,000 came from an account that existed on the date of separation. You don't say that this person owns the house is separate property,
Right.
but this $20,000 in it is marital and should be divided.
Divided in half, right.
Now, with that, it was money that was taken from a company that was founded when he had a housewife for about 25 years. So this company was established from that money, and if Kyle's head's gonna be, from that money, he went and opened another business with the equity, with that first established company's credit line, funding, everything. So is that the same thing? If it's after, it's just done?
Right.
So
It just
I
has to.
think, and y'all should definitely correct me if I'm wrong, but the way I think about it is kind of, you take a snapshot when
Right,
that
on the
separation
DOS,
starts.
right.
And lots of stuff can happen, it can go up and it can
Yeah,
go
yeah.
down. You're obviously not arguing for what happened if it went down, but, because of that, because it's not fair to get one way and not the other.
Right.
Instead, you basically, and
Yeah, you're right.
there's lots of discussion about what that actually is, from a snapshot perspective, but you take that picture of where it was, and then you try and assign a value to every different piece. And lots of discussion go into that. But other changes that happen after the separation
Right.
are meant to be.
Because there's separate, there's marital, and there's divisible, and divisible is what happens to the property after you separate. So, let's say you don't get to an agreement till 2 years down the road, which is not unusual, and someone has paid down a lot of equity, the principal equity in the house or business, then they get credit for that. So there may have been $200,000 worth of equity in the house when you separated, and now there's 3 because this person paid it down. You're really not entitled to that extra 100 because it wasn't because of your efforts per se. So you do take sort of a snapshot there at that point when you separate.
Well, whichever one.
Just want to point out that the panelists are speaking towards North Carolina law right now. Some other states have personal goodwill as a non-marital asset. So valuation needs to be done of one of these businesses that a spouse owns. You have to determine the goodwill associated inside that business, carve that out of the marital estate, and then split the rest. So we're lucky that, yeah, you're lucky that, we're dealing with North Carolina law, but some states, quite a number of states, you have to value the personal goodwill in the business first, take that out, and then do the rest of what we're talking about.
Wow.
Well, that's what we would do, but we wouldn't carve it out. I mean, I think part of the valuation, but
Right.
here, we would not carve that out as a separate property. But I
Right,
understand why you
other
would.
states
Yeah.
treat personal goodwill as attached to the spouse, and it's not a marital asset.
Interesting.
Nope, strictly North Carolina law.
Disclaimer, we're not doing anything else.
I think we're all licensed to practice just in the state.
So for Amanda, other than the free trader agreement, you got a couple in the middle of separation, getting ready to he's getting ready to purchase a house. He has that, is there any other document that needs to be sent in based on, like, the separation because of who has to sign off on the contracts and stuff?
Just to purchase the property?
To purchase, not the sale, I already know what's got going on.
Yeah, a free trader or a waiver of marital rights, either document will do. That's really all they need to purchase.
I will tell you, I had a mortgage lender ask me today for a custody agreement. And to make sure that there was an order agreement where they didn't have to pay any support. It's sort of like, well, they don't, so there is no agreement. That's sort of, but that's the first I've ever had that happen.
I've never heard
I
that
haven't
before.
either.
That's pretty,
I thought that was interesting.
in-depth.
Devoted underwriting.
Yeah.
Well, Elizabeth, I'll speak to that a little bit.
Okay.
They're not allowed to ask you about custody, alimony, or any of that for any loan that they're giving.
Well, this mortgage line, I mean, I was calling them half of my client, but I was like shocked when they said, no, we really didn't.
They're not allowed?
I did not know that.
I thought alimony was like a specific.
That's part of what your
line
income
item.
is.
Yeah,
Yes.
there's a comment that says on most personal financial statements, this does not include or have to include your alimony, child support, or other. So if there's a little clause on most personal financials, unless they've changed it,
Doesn't have to,
Just
but
have to.
can't.
But you might include it if it bumps.
Well, I would
up your-
include it if it bumps your income up so you can get the loan. I mean,
Yeah.
well, yes, that, but I'm
Yeah.
saying they're not allowed to ask.
That's interesting, I did not know that.
Staying in line with marital property, well, supposedly, if I own a house with my significant other, and we're planning to get married, but we're not married yet, do we need to change the deed after we get married?
That's the one thing in North Carolina law that we don't go by how it's titled. It matters when it's acquired, except for real property. And so if you buy property when you're not married, each of you owns half of that property. And if you're on the deed, let's say that your spouse owned the property, y'all got married, you still have no ownership rights in that property. It would be back out of the marital estate if you were not on the deed. And that's the one thing that's different. I don't know why that was carved out that way.
Why is it that some deeds just magically